Okay, good afternoon. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We have today Dan Lynch, a retired school-based ag teacher from that taught at Kutztown, Dan, correct?
Yeah.
Yep. Also retired from the Pennsylvania Game Commission as Southeast Regional Game Officer and Educator. Did I get that right?
That's correct, yeah.
Excellent. So I've been really excited for Dan's presentation this afternoon. He's a wealth of knowledge on Pennsylvania wildlife and wildlife biology. And Dan's going to share with us today the often overlooked benefits of Pennsylvania's predator species. And I'm also excited because he's going to throw in some sort of extra non-predator species that he's going to share some fun facts and information about. I'm going to be monitoring questions in the chat box. I know Dan does have some questions to ask the audience as we go. You can type your responses in the chat box, or if you're so inclined, you could unmute and answer verbally if you like. But again, I will be helping Dan monitor the chat, and we will have some time at the end to field any questions that you didn't get to ask. Dan did say, feel free to interject with questions throughout the presentation, but you may also hold your questions to the end. We should have a couple minutes to cover those when we wrap up. So Dan, take it away.
All right, thanks, John. So yeah, since there is literally 4 of us, including me on here, feel free if you have any questions while we're going along, and you can go ahead and unmute as long as you're doing it safely while you're driving, Mikan. We will, I certainly was hoping we get a bunch more people, but that is okay. I worked for the Pennsylvania Game Commission for 27 years as a wildlife educator, and 26 of those years I was a deputy state game warden. And in those 27 years, I dealt a lot with wildlife. And so if you have questions while we're talking about this, it's not specifically predators, because Jonathan said I have a couple other critters that I wanted to add to the program, simply because they sometimes can be a nuisance or a concern for people. As far as predators and benefits of predators, ecologically, there's definitely benefits of predators, because you can't just have prey species. But as far as, are they beneficial to farmers and landowners? Normally, those people don't think that they are. And so we're going to talk a little bit about them. I've always been involved in wildlife. Personally, I do a lot of hunting and trapping, fishing, camping, all that kind of good stuff. And when I retired, it seems like I still can't stay out of it. So I started a nuisance wildlife business. So I have a business called Wildlife Enterprises, LLC. And so I now, instead of doing it kind of for free, I kind of get paid to go out and try to help people out with a wildlife type problem. So we'll get started. This slide shows a lesser known hawk that we have in Pennsylvania. I mean, people just don't talk about him a lot. Lots of times he's hard to see because this guy is normally in the forest, but he's also eating one of the most common rodents that we have in Pennsylvania. And since I am a school teacher, I always wanted to add something to get you interactive. So do either of you know the species of bird that's on here and or whatever it's eating?
Is it a broadwing hawk?
Nope, not a broadwing.
Is it a Cooper's hawk?
Not a Cooper's hawk.
Goshawk.
So look at the coloration right about at the top of the wing, which would be our shoulder, by the way.
Oh, a red-shouldered hawk.
There you go. That's a red-shouldered hawk. Yep.
Okay.
So right, and the species that he's eating.
A shrew?
Yes, it's a shrew.
It's a shrew. Yeah.
Yep. And now, which specific shrew, I'd just be making that up, but it is a shrew, and you can normally know that by the pointed nose. So they have a pointed nose on them, and it's a really common species of prey. This type of predator-prey relationship goes on in all 67 counties that we have in Pennsylvania every single day. Without predators like this raptor species, we consuming lots and lots of rodents, they would multiply very quickly, and basically nature would go out of whack if we had way too many prey species. So the good part is that's not going to happen. So in addition to birds of prey like this hawk eating those things. You've got nighttime birds of prey, you've got owls eating them, and then just about every mammal species out there that's a predator of any kind is eating these shrews, moles, and voles. If we didn't have numerous predator species of different kinds, we'd witness some devastating effects of plants and conflicts with humans. Predators are an important part of the ecosystem, and I just kind of like this rabbit, so I kind of wanted to do that. So predators like this coyote, sometimes you look at this picture, you don't even see the coyote, but predators like this coyote hanging out in a cemetery learn to live in and around humans, and depending on what they eat or how informed we humans are about their lifestyles, they can potentially pose a threat to us, even if it's only a perceived threat. Wildlife problems are compounded by people who draw wildlife into residential areas with feeders and improperly stored garbage. It doesn't help communities where hunting and trapping cannot be pursued within their limits because of safety zone limitations and other restrictions. How we raise our livestock also has an effect on predators. Free-range chickens or ducks are pretty easy pickings for animals like raccoons, fox, coyote, hawks, and owls. And so keeping livestock in covered pens, making sure they roost in enclosed buildings at night, and possibly adding a guard dog to the barnyard all can have effect on keeping predators at bay. These are actually my chickens, and they're not free range. I just open up the door, and that's like one of the first or second times they've ever come outside. They didn't even know what to do. When we don't do anything or think that it can't happen in our fields, that's when some predation can occur. In addition to the previous calf photo, sheep can be on the menu for predators like bears, coyotes, and even bobcats. When predator populations start increasing in a geographical area, the possible spread of diseases like mange, distemper, and rabies can spread through them quickly. This is nature's way of slowing down population growth, and it isn't quick or nice to look at. Sick-looking animals, however, aren't the only ones who can pass on diseases to humans. Since skunks, I always like this picture too, since skunks, even young ones, as well as raccoons, bats, groundhogs, foxes, and coyotes are in Pennsylvania what we call a rabies vector, or likely carrier of rabies, they should not be relocated like other wildlife. Homeowners who set traps and catch these species face the choice of either killing the animal or releasing it. And releasing a skunk or raccoon, if you don't know what you're doing, can be kind of dangerous. If you get bitten or scratched and the animal runs away, you're going to spend, at least up to 24 hours waiting for some sort of a call back from Harrisburg lab telling you whether or not the animal was positive or negative for rabies. And it can be a problem.
Dan,
Yes, go ahead.
What's the biggest difference, like to see in a wild animal, the biggest difference between rabies and mange? Because I know that they can both be, like they can look similar, but how would you tell?
Sure. Let me see if I can go back. Whoops, I went
Okay.
the wrong way. That is mange. That is sarcoptic mange. You see over the back of this fox, his ear especially, you see how it's all dry and crackly, and all over the back, all of that sloughing off is dried skin, and they lose all of their hair. That is the epitome of mange right there, unfortunately. Now, rabies, you cannot tell that an animal has rabies. Well, looks like I have to do it this way. Wait, this went the wrong way. The only way to tell that an animal has rabies is by actually killing the animal. And when you do that, you want to make sure you don't shoot it in the head, because they need the brain tissue to test it. So that's the only way you can tell an animal has rabies, is through testing, because sometimes animals that have rabies are not aggressive. They're not like foaming at the mouth and chasing people down. They actually are completely calm. They're docile. And people are like, oh, I could feed that animal or pick it up. And they could simply have rabies and you would not know. So there's really no way to tell an animal has rabies. What you can tell is that they're not acting normal. That you can tell. And then, they basically need to be put down. Now, they're not tested unless they bite a person or scratch a person or a domestic pet. Other than that, they're just put down, buried, or put in a garbage bag and disposed of, if that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Sure. So how do we manage some populations of predators? Regulated hunting and trapping are two ways we use to effectively manage some populations, not all of them. Hunters and trappers must pass a test to purchase a license license, and then they do a lot of this management on their own dime and in the time they have available. Is there a question? Oh, there you go. This makes it economical for the state as a whole. When many people think of trapping, they think of something that folks did a long time ago, kind of like in this picture. And they kind of think that people don't do it anymore. And though that may be the case in some states, here in Pennsylvania, we actually have a very active trapping community. As a matter of fact, our state has the most licensed, what we call fur takers, than any other state in the nation. So this is something that I like to show this slide to people. So these are key messages when I'm either talking to somebody about trapping or having somebody talk to somebody else about trapping. So if someone says, well, why do you trap? If I say, well, I trap for the money, you could care less if there's any money. By the way, there's no money. Or it's in, my heritage. Well, okay, some people have weird things in their heritage, and that doesn't effectively communicate why people trap. But these 4 things do. 5 things. Regulated trapping does not cause wildlife to become endangered. Okay, and some people think that it does. So there are 16 species that are listed in Pennsylvania this is the Pennsylvania Hunting Digest. There's 16 species that are considered fur bearers. That's animals that you can trap. Only 13 of them can actually be trapped in Pennsylvania. This is the part where you can unmute. Can you name me a couple of those animals that you can legally trap in Pennsylvania that we call fur bearers?
Muskrat.
Muskrat's good one.
Beavers.
Beaver. Showed you one already. He's got mange.
Foxes, but I'll let somebody else go.
Okay. All right. Anything else? Mike, and I saw you on mute.
Mink.
Mink, that's a good one. Yep. Showed a picture of one on the garbage can. All right, well, I'll tell you what they are. The 16, go ahead. What was that?
Possum.
Possum, that's a good one. So we have red and gray foxes, coyotes, beaver, mink, raccoon, possum, skunk, bobcat, fisher, weasel, muskrat, otter. Those are the 13 you can. Then the 3 that are listed as fur bearers, but you can't trap them, are badger, marten, and porcupine. Of those 3, currently we only have 1. We only have porcupines. You can hunt a porcupine in a season, but you can't trap them. And we don't have badgers. I have no idea why the Game Commission lists badgers as being in Pennsylvania, because they're not. And the American marten is something that we're thinking about reintroducing back to Pennsylvania in the near future. So it's about the size of a mink, and they were indigenous to Pennsylvania. So there's only 13 critters that you can actually trap during a regulated season. So trapping is managed through scientifically based regulations that are strictly enforced by, and here it says conservation enforcement officers. In Pennsylvania now we call them game wardens. State wildlife agencies continuously review, develop rules, regulations, and in that area we call that best management practices. So there's BMPs for all kinds of jobs. There are BMPs for every species in North America, which is actually 22 different species that can be trapped in the United States and Canada. And regulated trapping provides many benefits, including in certain situations, reducing wildlife damage to crops and property, threats to human and health and safety. And we actually can protect some endangered species by trapping others. So any kind of bird that nests on a beach is the worst place to nest. So if you're a piping plover or something like that, you're already in trouble by constantly going to a beach, because A, we like to be on beaches, and B, you lay your eggs in the sand, they're completely exposed to birds and mammals, and they get eaten like big time. And the 5th one is not as most important, but most of the animals that we trap, you can either use as clothing, food, or some other product. So those are things I like to talk about. Since we're talking—
And I got a question for you.
Sure.
Okay, so my kids just did river otter tour yesterday, where we went to a state park. They did a river otter thing there with the DCNR people.
Okay.
And so why are they listed? Why are otters listed as you can take them? They told us yesterday you can't take them. Is that only in some parts of Pennsylvania, or is the whole state you can't take them, or is that only in our part of Pennsylvania you can't take them? We're in Somerset County, so.
Yep. So here's the deal for fishers, otters, and bobcat. There are only specific management units. We have multiple management units in Pennsylvania. There's only specific ones where we allow the taking of those 3 species, and it's only 1 per person per year. You have to buy a permit to harvest one. And the reason is that they are highly populated in some management units, partially populated, and then in some management units, we barely have any. So we don't want to say, oh, you can trap them anywhere in Pennsylvania, you know, if there's not an abundant population. And to give you an idea, otters this year during otter trapping season, which is only about 8 days, by the way, it's 8 days long. I think they harvested somewhere around 119 in the state, but that is only because the weather was so good that people were able to get, like, there wasn't a lot of ice in the creeks or anything like that. And it allowed people to go out and more people to go out and try to harvest them. But on average, when we have an actual winter, we harvest somewhere around 30 in the entire state. So it's not a big population. That's, you know, better harvested.
I thought they misspoke yesterday, and then, well, I guess it was Monday. And then I was like, well, maybe I'm totally wrong about that, but I'm gonna have to clear it up with my kids. So thanks for
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I have to look. What management unit are you in? Do you know?
What are we're Somerset County? What are we? So I knew this at the beginning of the year. Hang on a second.
That's all right.
No, I can't find us.
Okay. Well,
Oh wait, here it is.
go ahead.
2C. I knew it was 2 something. I couldn't remember.
So it's not
letter.
open. The only management units where you can trap otters are 1A, 1B, 2F, 3C, and 3D. So it's very limited where you can trap them. And that's simply because the Game Commission determines approximately what the population is in each one of those management units. And if it's not high enough, then they don't allow it. So that's why. So if they left you with the impression you're not allowed to trap them, they should have been a little more specific in that area. That's all.
Yes. Thank you.
Sure. No problem. So this photo shows I like to show a photo of a trap, since obviously we're not in person, or I would show you a trap. And the reason being is a lot of people, their idea of a trap is something from Walt Disney's The Fox and the Hound. Walt Disney's The Fox and the Hound, and most people have seen them. By the way, Diane, I just realized who you were. Hello, how you doing? Sorry, at first your name came up and I'm like, I don't know who that is. Now I do. Sorry about that. You picture the Fox and the Hound trap. It has teeth on it. It's huge. Now this looks huge because it's on a slide, but this trap, when it's opened up, this particular trap is about 5 inches in diameter. So the jaw spread is only 5 inches. But you know, that Fox and the Hound, if you ever wanted a great marketing person, it was Walt Disney, because that movie was probably made in the, I don't know, 70s or something like that. People still watch it today and they picture that as a trap. This is actually a foothold trap. And it's not a leg hold trap. It doesn't catch an animal by the leg, it catches them by the foot. And this is a live restraining device, meaning that if an animal gets his paw caught in there, I could either dispatch him or I could release him again. He's not dead. He's simply caught by the foot. It doesn't break their foot, because if it does, it'd be a little difficult to release them uninjured. And there's no point in trying to hurt the animal. We're simply trying to hold the animal until the trapper comes, or if it's a biologist, they're doing some sort of research. All of the otters and the fisher and the beaver and some of the other animals that we now have in Pennsylvania, we actually got from states who used trappers to use a trap like this to catch the animal so we could reintroduce them to our state. So it's a little difficult because you can't actually see it. I don't have one, but I wanted to put a picture there so that you had an idea of what the trap is. And if you look at my trap, you will see there's a copper tag on the swivel. Can't really point to it, but a copper tag on the swivel. Every trap has to have a tag on it with person's name and address, or a trapper ID number, so that, people know whose trap it is, that kind of stuff. So, okay. So this is a different style of trap. This is a trap used for animals in the water, because this is a killing trap. It can only be used in the water or water course so that you don't accidentally get another critter to go through it. This is actually kind of small. The jaw spread is only 4 inches, so it kind of looks bigger because it's on this picture, but some people call this a conibear, which is not correct because a conibear is a brand. This is a body gripping trap. So the animal swims through it, hits those 2 little triggers, and it's like a large mouse trap. So those are the 2 traps that I wanted to show. This is just a couple of photos showing me actually making what's called a set. So I use the word set when I'm talking about trapping 2 different ways. I set a trap, meaning I push down the levers and I open it up and I set it so that an animal could step on it. And then when I'm going to place that trap in the ground to try to catch a critter, that's called a set. So there's the trap. I dug a little hole. I'm putting the trap in the ground, and then I'm going to cover that trap with either dried grass or dirt or peat moss or something like that. And I'm either going to set that on a trail, or I'm going to set that, I don't know if you can see it real well, but just to the right of my hands is a little pipe sticking up out of the ground. And there's bait inside that pipe. And so the critter is focused. This is for a fox. He's focused on the smell coming out of that pipe. And when he steps close enough, hopefully he steps on that trap. So that's what that is. So if I'm successful, this is what it looks like on a typical day on the trap line. Obviously, it was from a while ago because my hair is slightly grayer now than it was there. But my wife likes to goof on me about that. Diana, of course, saw me probably with brown hair at one time. I don't know, maybe it was still gray when she saw me, I'm not sure.
It has been a while.
Okay, yeah.
I saw you in person.
Yes, that's right. I trap because I enjoy being an active participant in wildlife management. That is one of the cool things about trapping, because you actually are an active participant. I enjoy spending time in the outdoors, learning about wildlife sighting and trying to outsmart certain critters. I also put up all of my furs, and when I say put them up, skin the critter, of course, you flesh it, you take all the fat off of it, the meat off of it, you dry it, and then you can either get the fur tanned, which I do a lot, and I either sell tanned fur on eBay, I give it away to people. We've made certain things. My wife makes can koozies all the time now with fur koozies, so you can get, a fox koozie or a bobcat or a coyote koozie or a beaver koozie. And then we also eat a bunch of the critters, mostly the beaver. Beaver tastes just like beef. If you've ever, if you like hamburgers and roasts, and that's exactly, a beaver is just a tiny little herbivore, and they taste delicious. So let's talk about some of the predators in Pennsylvania. Red foxes are found pretty much across the state, all 67 counties, both farms, developments, fields, and forests. Gray foxes more commonly found in wooded areas. Their natural camouflage allows them to blend best in woodlands with a shaded habitat. Real quick on their feet, both the red and the gray have 4 toes that show in a track, but both of them on their front feet have a 5th toe, just like your dog, or most dogs anyhow, have a dew claw, which is up high, doesn't show up in the track. Some people get their domestic dogs, their dew claws taken off when they're a pup, but you do have 5 toes in the front, 4 on the back. Scats of both of these foxes would look very similar in shape and size and makeup. Location is usually the best way the best clues to determine which one left behind as far as where it is, middle of the woods, out in the field. Their scat is usually pointed on the ends and often contains hair and bones. Coyotes are found in all 67 counties. Again, they have 4 toes that show in a track, but their front foot has a dew claw. And normally the front foot is bigger than the hind foot. So you see a track, if you follow one in the mud or the snow, and one is definitely bigger, that's always the front foot. Canines, your dog as well, given the opportunity, will go to some prominent feature in your yard or walking on a trail and drop scat there because it's a signpost marker. It lets everybody else know in the canine world that this is their territory. So this is like coyotes, like all the other canines, they show the actual toenail marks in the track. Where if it was a feline, a bobcat or something like that, it would show the toe imprints, but not normally the claws. The interesting thing about coyote tracks versus other, like a domestic dog, is that normally the two inner toenails point towards each other in every track. Whereas a red fox and a gray fox, they're straight out from the toe pad, as well as almost all domestic dogs are straight out, but coyotes point in. This guy's pretty common everywhere, raccoons. They have 5 toes in the front, 5 toes on the back. This is a common track. So the track on the left is the front foot. The track on the right is the hind foot. The heel part on the hind foot isn't showing in this, but many times it does. It looks kind of like a little, like a baby foot track. And then what normally happens after this track, the next track is the hind left foot and the front right. And then they switch back and forth like that. That's normal, the normal way that they walk. They're omnivores. They many times though show more berries and seeds in their scat. And the interesting or the important thing to know is that raccoon scat can carry a parasite that can be fatal to humans. So if you have raccoons in a barn or an attic, especially dried raccoon scat, and you're going to clean it up by sweeping it up or raking it up, let's say there's a whole family living in there, you definitely want to have a face mask on, a good one, like an N95, because you can actually get very, very sick, and people have died from inhaling dried dust from raccoon scat. This is an older picture, obviously, but in addition to getting in the human trash cans, nest depredation is a common reason some folks want this predator to be managed. So this raccoon was caught in what's called a dog-proof trap. It's made to be, or we also call it a species-specific trap. Now you can't see it real well. You can kind of, if you look down at where his paws are, it's the other front paw that's in the trap. And basically, the trap is a tiny little piece of pipe. It's about 4 inches long and about 1 inch in diameter. And we put bait inside there. What I usually use is mini marshmallows and cat food. They love marshmallows. Cats and stuff don't really like marshmallows. So I'm going to be around a place that has cats, I will put marshmallows with powdered Kool-Aid mixed in with it. So it's fruity. Cats don't really like fruit stuff, so we try to keep cats out of these things. And a raccoon, what he'll do is he'll stuff his paw in there and start pulling all the marshmallows out. And inside there's a trigger. And raccoons are very dexterous with their toes, and they will grab that trigger and pull up, and it catches their foot inside the pipe. So raccoons are the only critter who's known to chew at the trap when they get caught. And if their foot is sticking anywhere where they can feel it, they won't chew. But if it gets numb by being in a regular trap like that one that I showed you, sometimes they will chew on their feet. People say, oh, they're chewing their foot off. No, they're chewing at the trap and their foot is numb. But this trap, you can't. This trap, the foot is inside a pipe and it works really, really well. I wouldn't say the raccoon likes it, but it works really, really well. Skunk are another predator that humans have conflicts with at times. In addition to being nest raiders, they love to eat chickens, tear up lawns and golf courses looking for grubs. And they can spray when they get excited or decide to nest under your deck or something like that. And they're also considered a rabies vector species. So if they are caught by a pest control person, they're not released. Striped skunk, these are what the foot tracks look like. They kind of look like a mini bear. And their scat is normally, it can have all kinds of particles in it because they are omnivores. They eat just about anything. Opossum, also a cool critter because it's the only animal you can start with an O or P and still be correct. He's either a possum or an opossum. They dine on free-range chickens. They love free-range chickens. But the cool thing is they rarely have they ever been known to carry any diseases that are transmissible to humans. No one's really figured out why yet. Possum sign, they have 5 toes on both the front and the back, and the hind foot has what is called an opposable thumb, just like ours. Their scat looks, it depends on what species or what things they're eating as to what it looks like. Most people can rarely determine the scat. As a matter of fact, that picture is rubber scat. Weasels, we have 3 different types of weasels in Pennsylvania. This guy here is called a long-tailed weasel. Then there's a short-tailed weasel, which is half his size. Then there's a least weasel, which is a third of his size. And weasels are very difficult to keep out of a chicken pen. Literally, they can fit through chicken wire. So if they can get their head through it, they can get their body through it. So their head is very, very tiny. The deal is they love to eat people's chickens, but they're only going to kill the chicken. They're going to eat a tiny little bit of it. They may kill every chicken in the pen. As soon as the chickens start freaking out, this little dude says, you know what? Nobody's leaving here. And he kills them all. It's called surplus killing. And people are like, oh, they must be like vampires. They didn't eat them. No, they're not vampires. They're weasels. And they do eat chicken, but I mean, how much chicken could this little dude eat? So they can be a problem. All the different members of the weasel family have 5 toes that normally show the claws on them. The weasels have this tiny little long scat that's normally twisted on the ends. Usually animals that have pointed scat normally are because they eat a lot of things with hair on them. So weasels will eat all the moles and voles and shrews as well as things that have feathers. Second member of the weasel family can cause damage to backyard fowl as well. That's the mink. Again, feet are pretty similar, scat's pretty similar. Then we had talked a little bit about otters already. So they're also a member of the weasel family. And if you raise trout or any other aquatic species and you have them in a stocked pond, these guys can eliminate the entire pond of your fish very quickly. They are cool critters, but they are predators. Again, Walt Disney did a great job of making you think that this guy is like such a cutesy wootsy dude, but this guy is just a predator. He doesn't eat plants at all. He only eats meat, and he rarely eats dead things. He kills his own things to eat them. As a matter of fact, there is an otter in the Amazon that can kill a caiman. If you know what a caiman is, it's a member of an alligator family. And so the cute little otter in the Amazon kills a caiman. So they're cool, but they are predators. Their scat is not like the other animals' scat. They normally are just a whole bunch of fish scales, crayfish claws, things like that. But they leave it all at the same spot. So all of the otters will stop at a particular place along the creek or the lake, and it's called a latrine. And that's where they figure out all the other otters that are in the area, because they go and sniff out what they left there. And it's kind of an interesting thing when you actually see it. Another member of the weasel family is a fisher. So this guy is he's probably twice as big as the marten, the American marten. I don't have a picture of the marten, but the marten is an animal that we're planning on reintroducing. Game Commission's planning on reintroducing to Pennsylvania. These guys spend a great deal of time in the trees. They eat mostly squirrels, chipmunks, and porcupines. By eating porcupines, fishers can benefit the people. So this is one benefit of predators. They can benefit people who have cabins or live in the woods that have anything wooden built on their house or their shed or whatever. Because if you touch things and you have salt on your hands and you touch them and a porcupine finds them, wait a minute, that's what you're going to get. So porcupines, even though they are herbivores, they will eat your whole shed or your house if you're not there for a while. And so an animal like a fisher is about the only animal that actively eats porcupines. They can kind of be beneficial that way. So this dude here is another herbivore, and he can definitely be a nuisance. This is a groundhog or a woodchuck. If they dig holes on a field edge or next to the road, it's not really a big deal. If they are constantly digging holes in your pastures and you have horses or cattle, they can be a huge problem. All these guys need to do while they're running is stick 1 foot down in a groundhog hole, and their whole body weight goes over, break a leg. They can cause damage in hay fields to equipment, things like that. About the only feline predator that we have here in the state is the bobcat. They will eat both mammals and birds. They've been known, as far as domestic stuff, to eat lambs. And they'll certainly eat any type of fowl that you have. So because it's a feline, you've got 4 toes that show in the front, even though they have a 5th claw, but it's up high, and 4 toes in the back. But you rarely will see the actual claw mark in the snow or the mud because they're retractable. So when they walk around, you just see the heel pad and the 4 toe pads. Scat normally has a lot of hair in it. So this is one of the critters that isn't really a predator, but the beaver is the largest rodent in North America. So this guy is related to the mouse that's running around in your garage. You do not want a 60-pound mouse running around in your garage. And they can definitely cause conflicts at times. They're great engineers, but they can make life difficult for landowners or farmers. Throughout my career with the Game Commission, we dealt with a lot of nuisance type beavers. They're usually the people that don't want anything to happen to them are the people that live up on a hill in the development, not near the water. It's the people who are next to the water where every day they walk out and their entire yard is flooded or a bridge is washed out. They normally want these guys taken care of. So they can flood a field pretty easily, which does create good habitat for some species. However, it can be detrimental to others. So their tracks, 5 toes in the front, not webbed, 5 toes in the back. That is what they use for swimming. So they're webbed. They also, it doesn't show in this picture, but they have a split toenail. One of those toes has a split toenail, which they use to comb an oil that comes from a sack back by their rear end. And they comb that in their hair every single day to waterproof their hair because they spend a lot of time in the water. This is rubber scat, but the real scat is normally deposited in the water because it's made of basically sawdust. If you see it, it was recently laid, because normally within 12 hours or so, that just breaks apart and floats away and you never would actually see it. What you do see is the sign. They leave a lot of sign where they feed. Contrary to popular belief, they do not eat trees. If they ate trees, there would be nothing left. They're eating the bark and the leaves. They want the leaves, but they can't climb a tree because they have webbed feet and a giant tail. So they cut the tree down. By cutting the tree down, they wear down their incisors because they have continuously growing incisors. They need to constantly be chewing to wear them down. And then they eat the bark. They may use that tree to build a lodge or a dam, or just leave it laying there. So in this picture right here on the left, obviously it says lodge, and you can see, even though it looks kind of big, there's really not much space above the water line. It's a tiny little cavern. People, we use the word lodge as if we're going out west and we're going to stay in a beautiful lodge. That's a flea infested tiny little cavern inside there. It's not a lodge, it's a house. It's where they live. And then the one to the right is the food cache. Even though it looks like it's above the water, there is no opening in there. The food cache is probably bigger than the lodge, but all the sticks are underneath the water. And so the beaver builds a food cache because this is on a lake. This lake's going to freeze over in the wintertime, and there's no way to get out. So there's 2 entrances or exits in the lodge. They're always underwater. During the winter, when it's frozen, they swim out. They can hold their breath for about 15 minutes. They swim over to the food cache. They cut whatever branches they need. They take it back in. They go above the water, and that's it. So if you are a beaver and you build a lodge and you have no food cache, you're not going to be living very long come the winter. When we trap them or to remove them, we can use a couple of different ways. This is a body gripping trap, a killer type trap. And the log on the right and the log on the left kind of force the beaver to swim up to this little mud pie that I built there. If you look on top of that little mud pie, there is a darker looking little paste, and that's the castor gland, which is another gland that comes from the beaver that makes this a territorial set. The beaver is ticked off when he smells that castor because he's like, yo, this is my spot. And I put castor on there from a jar from a different beaver, and the beaver will swim through that square to get that trap, and well, it'll be over pretty quickly. This is another way to trap them. In front of the arrow is a foothold trap, a larger one. And then there's castor in some mud, and there is a cable that you cannot see that is attached to a stake in the mud and then to a bag of rocks out into the deep water, or cement blocks in the deep water. The beaver steps on the trap. He can only go one way. There's a one-way slide on it. He swims out in the deep water. He does not drown. It's semantics, but he doesn't drown. A beaver cannot take water into his lungs. They're a semi-aquatic animal. They don't take water in their lungs. However, they run out of oxygen. So they do what we call asphyxiate. So either way, he's dead, but just know that they don't drown. Mink don't drown, muskrats don't drown. They can't take water into their lungs. Third way to catch them is with a snare. Can you guys see my cursor, by the way? Oh, okay, duh, I don't know why I didn't use that. So this is the snare right here, and the beaver there's a stick right here with some lure on it, and the beaver is living out here somewhere. He comes swimming over here, goes right through the cable to smash that thing, and this thing closes around his body, and he is attached there, and he's alive, just kind of ticked off when you get there. Fourth way is not a way that I like to do it, but people are like, oh, this is the best way. So this trap is a live catch trap called, this one is called a Hancock trap. There's another one called a Coro, K-O-R-O. Those traps cost $400. They weigh about 75 pounds without a beaver in it. And the only way to set it, it's like a big clamshell. You have to the trapper has to stand inside the trap, putting your feet on one side and your hands on the other, and literally lock this thing while you're inside of it. It could go off at any time and basically probably knock you out, break an arm. They're terrible traps. And so I prefer to use, if I'm going to remove one and relocate it, I use that little snare, catches them around the body. So much easier. The snare, by the way, costs about $1.05 a piece, and this costs $400. And if the beaver comes swimming into this and the stick in his mouth snaps the trap in front of him, you will never get him in this trap again. They have a long memory. They're never going back in this trap again. So it's not one I normally use, but people are always like, oh, take this nuisance beaver and put it somewhere else. Really? So Mike, and you would like me to take the nuisance beaver and release it in Diana's neighborhood? No, we try not to release them. We try, they are not endangered. They're not threatened. They're everywhere. And so we do put them down normally. This is my trapping partner. And in 20 years, we've caught about 200 of these beavers already. So last predator is the apex predator, or last predator I'm going to talk about is the apex predator, or the main predator in Pennsylvania, which is black bear. Black bears can have a lot of conflict with people. They can get into expensive beehives. If fed by people, which is unlawful, they can get bold and show up on porches and decks, like these tracks right here. When that happens, we many times will have the game commissioner will come in with what's called a culvert trap. And it's called a culvert trap because this is a section of culvert pipe. It's like the pipes that go underneath the roads. It's about 8 feet, 10 feet long. This one has a swing door on it that you open up this door and it latches. And then we put a bunch of donuts out here. And then we put a string of donuts going inside. And then inside here, we put the best donuts, the ones that we decide not to eat, in a little cage. The bear eats all these donuts. He walks inside here. He grabs the cage. The door swings shut. Once he's in there, if we're not going to just relocate him or whatever, we're going to do some stuff for research. We use what's called a jab stick, and we put the drugs in here in this little syringe. And one person holds flashlight so we can try to see the butt. And this, you bang on the flashlight on this side to get his nose on this side, which means his butt's on this side. And then you jab him. Then if we're not going to do that, we're just going to let him out. We just open up the cage and he jumps out. And this is a place where we were just doing research because probably putting ear tags in, but this bear, I can see already has an ear tag right here. So people think it's highly stressful to be caught. We've caught the same bear 10 days in a row. So I don't think it's stressful. I think he likes donuts. Okay. And he doesn't have to worry about anything. He knows we're going to come in 20 or 10 hours and let him go again. So people who come with us when we bear trap think this is super stressful. It's more stressful having people around in case something goes bad, but the bear could really care less. I think they have a short memory and I don't think it really bothers them. So again, not a predator, but a critter that can cause problems in Pennsylvania. Bucks, at the time of the year when they start to rub the velvet off, it's not really such a big deal. They'll go to branches and they'll rub this off. which at one time was thought primarily to rub the velvet off, or the hair off of their antlers, which really isn't true. Even if you had a buck and a pen and you had no way of rubbing it off, it's still going to come off. It's just hair and skin. It's going to slough off. But they're actually making a visual sign, like this bright white stick compared to all the brown ones. And then at the top of their heads and around their eyes, they have glands, and they're going to leave their scent on here that says, "Hi, I'm Jonathan." Sorry, Jonathan, had to use you there. And that's not a big deal in the woods. However, if you're a nursery grower, that buck comes in and does 20 or 30 of these one night. No one's buying this tree from you. And that may have taken 10, 12 years to get that big. No one's buying that tree. So if you're even thinking about being a nursery owner in Pennsylvania and you're not thinking about putting fencing up, you are seriously wasting your time, because there's only one way to keep deer out for good, and that is to fence them. A deer is a browser. They do graze, they do eat grass, but they're primarily a browser. So they eat the last 2 to 3 inches of branches. That's what they want. They want the new growth on it. When they stand up, the adults can reach to about a height of 6 feet. So this is what we call deer landscaping. These are probably not highly nutritious trees, but if you get in an area like this and this type of tree is being eaten this much, it probably tells you the population is too high, and they are eating whatever they possibly can. Now realize that if you're not an adult, you're a young deer, you're not reaching any of this stuff up here. So costly fencing works, but it has to be high enough, which is normally 10 feet, has to be built well, it has to be constantly maintained. Another non-predator, but a concern in Pennsylvania, are Canada geese. And they're not Canadian, by the way. There's a Canadian hockey team, but there are no Canadian geese. There are Canada geese. They too can cause human-wildlife conflicts. They like open areas. They feed strictly on grass and other vegetation. And because of their grass diet, their scat is often green when fresh, but black when dried. So if you've ever been golfing or at one of your kids' soccer games, this is what you normally will see out in the field all over the place. A pair of geese can quickly multiply in the springtime. Right now, by the way, if you see groups of geese that are still together, like 15, 20 of them, those are the ones, those are last year's young ones. They are not going to reproduce. At this time of the year in Pennsylvania, they're paired up. So you'll see a pair over by itself chasing other geese away. They're getting ready to determine who's going to get the best spot to make a nest. But if you see the 15 or 20 of them all together, those are last year's geese, and they're not actually going to reproduce this year. So this is a different one. Can you anybody tell me what this damage is, or what you think this damage is? Who it was created by?
Porcupine.
Okay, any other guesses?
Or no, elk. A woodpecker.
That guy. Created by the pileated woodpecker, which is no big deal if it's in the woods, no big deal. But if that is on your house, that's a big deal. Woodpeckers, if you have bugs inside your siding or anything like that, this dude will find it, and they will literally start to tear your house apart. So there is a federal agency out there that can help with those kinds of things, and it's a USDA APHIS. APHIS is Animal Plant Health Inspection Service, and they do wildlife nuisance things, not just on predators, but other things throughout Pennsylvania. Both of my kids worked for USDA. One is in New Jersey and one is in Florida. And so they both work on airfields. So they're trying to protect you flying in and flying out and not sucking up a Canada goose or a kestrel or landing on a deer or something like that on airfields. And so, excuse me, APHIS will help landowners, help farmers. Sometimes there's costs involved. It depends on what the problem is. They provide technical assistance and training so that people can do stuff themselves, but legally. So the picture at the top left, you're not allowed to set traps on top of stakes to catch hawks. You're not allowed to, on the bottom left, put a body gripping trap in a bucket on land and put bait inside to try to catch a coon because of a raccoon, because if a dog or a cat goes in there, he's dead immediately. And if you have problems with deer, the last thing you want to do is pile bait and allegedly get rid of it that way. So they try to help people solve problems legally. They discourage feeding. I always love that raccoon picture up there that somebody thought that was a good idea, putting a bowl out there. We do not replace people's feeders when bears eat them. We've had the Game Commission, we've had people bring feeders in all the time and said, you know, your bear destroyed my feeder, you're going to pay for it again. I'm like, no. The picture of the rumen there, which is a cow rumen, or it's probably an elk rumen, is that animal died from acidosis. People go to their camps and they pile out corn in the wintertime thinking it's a good idea for deer and elk. And many times deer and elk are found dead right on the corn pile because they're not, when they start eating corn, when people start growing corn, they eat a little bit at a time. But if they aren't getting any corn in their rumen, and then you just dump piles of corn there and they gorge themselves on it, they basically get an overdose of acid in their stomach and they can actually die. So there's lots of other wildlife issues. This one down here on the bottom left is kind of cool. This was a wolf dog that was in Philadelphia, and somebody had him as a pet. And on day one, after they got him illegally as a pet, by the way, one of the homeowners or the dog owners left him off the leash in Fairmount Park, and he was on the run for about 3 months. And we ended up catching him in a foothold trap using a hot dog because all the neighbors were feeding him hot dogs. So that was my only wolf that I ever actually caught. And he ended up going to a wolf sanctuary in Lidditz, and then he died of Lyme's disease, believe it or not. So this is the info on APHIS. All you have to do is Google it, actually, if you're interested in something like that. So predators are important. They're an important part of the natural ecosystem in Pennsylvania habitats. They serve a function of controlling prey species to help maintain a healthy balance in nature. When their populations move close to humans or interact with our daily lives, we sometimes are scared, frustrated, or unsure of what to do. Utilizing regulated hunting and trapping, contacting a wildlife professional, or simply changing the way we feed our pets and livestock usually can solve the issue of predator management. Predators in Pennsylvania are here to stay. So I've tried to explain some of the importance to the food chain as well as how we try to maintain a balance with raising livestock, pets, and prey species. So if any of you were a predator, let's say, like say a red fox, and you came to me for advice on how to get along in Pennsylvania successfully, I'd have to say that not everyone appreciates predators. So I'm going to leave it at that. I always like this picture. I always trying to figure out how do I use this picture in the slide presentation. I just think that looks cool. So you all can unmute if you would like. That is my Predators in PA program. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them.
All right, perfect job, Dan, and perfect timing. We have exactly 5 minutes of scheduled time left for your questions. So fire away. Dan is, many of you have probably come across him already. He's an absolute wealth of knowledge and experience when it comes to Pennsylvania wildlife. So any questions you have, now is your time.
I don't have anything. I'm just gearing up to get some of my students ready for Envirothon. And so some of the things that you mentioned is good. And I'm definitely going to take it back and share that with them. So thank you very much.
Sure. And I don't know if you've seen, there's, you probably did for the Envirothon, there's a couple of videos that I put together that are online that talk about all the different critters and stuff on Envirothon as well too. So, yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. It's good information as always.
You bet. Nice seeing you again.
You too.
All right.
Hey, going once, going twice. Anybody have any last questions for Dan before we adjourn here?
Nope. Thank you, John, too, for your work.
Absolutely. They pay me for it. All right. Well, thank you very, very much, Dan. Like I said, I was very excited for this and you did a fantastic job. And thank you all for joining us here this afternoon. I don't want to speak for Dan, but just knowing my experience and encounters with him, I know he's trying to retire and do some other things in life, but I think he's always open to an email or a phone call if you have
Oh,
any
sure.
questions for him, because he is the man to go to if you have any wildlife questions. So
Sure, no problem. I gladly help any of the teachers out with anything that I can.
Yep.
Or even just getting you the right contact.
sure. And I met your replacement, Dan, just
Audrey.
the other.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep. So that's exciting.
Yep, sounds good.
Okay. Thank
Okay.
you all very, very much. I will send a recording out with a follow-up email. Enjoy the rest of your afternoons. Thank you so much.
All right,
Thank you.
see you guys.
Yeah.
You bet.